It's Remembrance Sunday tomorrow, and I think it's appropriate to remember and to honour the sacrifices people made and the courage that they showed in the last two world wars and other wars, and also to keep in mind what a terrible thing, a revolting thing war is, and what bad effects it has, not just the immediate physical effects. And to that end, I'd like to talk about my granddad, who I only found out recently had been a fighter pilot during World War One. Now, what I'd like to do is let me just begin by showing you a picture of him. If I can bring that up there, then in fact let me do it this way. If you can see that picture there. Now, that is a picture from the IWM, that's the Imperial War Museum. That's from their records. That's a picture. That picture has their little logo at the bottom. The Royal Flying Corps on the Western Front, 1914 to 1918. You see that bunch of fighter pilots? That was taken in, I think, April, I think actually the 1st of April, 1918. And those guys, if you look at there, if I can zoom in a little bit, you might see a bit better. Those are tough guys. Those are killers. If you look at the confident way they're standing, the way they're looking direct into the camera, the way they're quite cheerful in the face of ever-present death, and also the kind of good humour, their comfort in very heavy, dirty clothes, doing a dirty, very aggressive job. And if I go down a bit, then what I want to show you is this. What you can see, that text there, it says object description: observers and pilots of number 22 squadron at Vergaland Aerodrome, 1st of April 1918. Each of them had brought down at least 3 German aircraft. Note the flying kit, then it left to right, it names all the people. Now, down the bottom, if you go third from the left, is Captain RSP, that's Robert Sidney Pierce Bobey. Okay, and that fella, third from the left, is that one there, 1, 2, 3, him. Now, if I zoom in a bit, you might be able to see him more closely. Look how tough those guys are. Necessarily, they are killers. Now, that Captain Bobey there, he's the one, not quite looking at the camera, I think he's having a bit of a joke actually, holding the mascot. It looks like a rabbit. That looks like a big black rabbit with a white streak down its face, with the ears over there and the paws down there. I'm guessing that's 22 Squadron's rabbit. So now I would like to think that he was an ace. You need 5 kills to be an ace. Each of those people has taken down at least 3. He's a captain. Most of them are lieutenants or captain. So I would like to think that the fact that he's a captain means he got a few more than 3, but I don't know. If I show you this book, this is a book that I bought wondering was my granddad mentioned in that, Bristol F2 Fighter Races of World War One. And he is not mentioned in that. This looks like a well-researched book, so I'm guessing he might not have been an ace. I'd like to fantasize that he was, but okay. He won a bunch of other honours. If I go through them briefly here, he got the Silver Medal of Military Valour. And that is the Italian equivalent of the Military Cross. It's given out about the same number of times. It has the same frequency and prestige of the Military Cross. So I'm guessing he must have done something, in addition to knocking out 3 German aircraft, he must have done something pretty kind of spectacular. What I want to show you is this cutting from the London Gazette. That's where awards of medals get recorded. That's publication date 10th of September 1918, supplement 30805, page 10742. So if I go down right to the bottom of that page, you'll see there Lieutenant, hold on, I need to go down further. Hold on. You see down the bottom right hand corner of that page, that obscure page, Lieutenant Temporary Captain Robert Sidney Pierce Bobey, Lancashire Fusiliers and Royal Flying Corps. And he got the award of the Silver Medal for Military Valour. That is quite a rare award. You have to do something pretty brave in order to get that. Now, he was also reported to have been a pilot officer in May of 1940. That's World War II. Now, a pilot officer is usually somebody who flies in combat. I can't imagine that would have been possible, because he would have been in his mid-40s by that date, but I don't know. He also got mentioned in dispatches a number of times. I found out about, or I've been told about, 3 occasions, one in 1941 and 2 in 1943. That's mentioning in dispatches is where the official military newspaper commends you for your courage, for your bravery, for something you've done. So I would love to find out more about him and what he did. I simply don't have the time, and I don't have the skill. If there's anyone out there who does have the skill and can do that for me, I am going to be very grateful. But what I can tell, I think, is he must have been a very brave man. There he is there, that character, holding the rabbit, holding the mascot with all those other fellas. A brave man. Now, whilst he was in the Flying Corps, he fought at the Battle of Megiddo. He was stationed out in what was then called Palestine, and I actually have his shorts from when he was out there. Let me just show you this. Now, if you see that, that is a pair of World War I desert shorts. You see that? Shorts with braces, even got braces and buttons to hang the braces on. Now, I had those because I thought they were so funny. I used to wear those for fancy dress parties when I was a little boy, because they were straight out of It Ain't Half Hot Mum. Lofty out of It Ain't Half Hot Mum would have worn those. Those are the shorts that he wore when he was out in Palestine. I think my dad told me he was out in Palestine. If he was out there, I think he would have taken part in the Battle of Megiddo. The Battle of Megiddo is where Bristol F-2 fighters basically massacred the retreating Turkish army and knocked the Ottoman Empire out of World War II in September of 1918. Now, if I go back to that picture again, if you see that aeroplane there in the background, that is the Bristol F-2 fighter, and that's the plane that my granddad flew, and that basically was a killing machine. You had one Lewis machine gun at the front, you had a pair, two Lewis machine guns out the back, and also you could carry 240 pounds of bombs. That aeroplane for its day, I think in 1918, that would have been the equivalent of a space shuttle today equipped with ray guns. And these guys, I guess it's a slight exaggeration to say that they would have been seen as almost the equivalent of Han Solo out of Star Wars, but very, very tough fighting guys. Now you can read about the Battle of Megiddo here, and also the Battle of Sharon, which was a battle within the Battle of Megiddo. And basically what the British plan was to bombard the Turkish enemy and to break their line, bombard them with artillery, bombard them with bombs from the Bristol F-2 fighters. And then when you broke the lines, the Turks flew or ran in retreat back across the desert, and then they sent in the Bristol fighters to bomb them and strafe them with machine guns and to wipe them out, to massacre them. At the Battle of Megiddo, of 32,000 Turkish troops, only 6 got away. The rest were killed or taken prisoner, because as they were retreating over the desert, the very powerful Bristol F-2 fighters flew down and just wiped them out and basically kicked the Turks out of the war. It was a very decisive victory, a very, very one-sided victory, which was based on the integrated and effective use of air power. That picture there, that shows the aftermath of, if you can see that, it shows the aftermath of the retreat of the Turkish army after the Battle of Sharon. They've basically been they were trying to get away and take their equipment back with them across the desert. F-2 fighters come in, they run away, and that's what's left. They were basically pretty much bombed out of existence. So the next thing then is why I only found out about it 3 years ago. And I find this very, very surprising. My dad didn't tell me anything about it. What I think happened, what I suspect probably happened, is after that experience, he found it very difficult to fit back in to society. Uh, um, if you can imagine, in those days, a fighter pilot in World War One would have had like 3 times the adulation that a fighter pilot in World War Two had. Terrific adulation, just seen as these almost superhuman characters, also possessing tremendous power, these very powerful machines, and new armaments like interrupter machine guns that fire through the propellers or the propeller of the aeroplane, and also being very close to death. This book here, if I bring up this book there, the first air campaign, August 1914 to November 1918, that one says that the average life expectancy for a World War One fighter pilot was 69 hours, which I guess that's about, I don't know, 3 weeks of operation, 3 weeks. I mean, that was not, you did not have a long life expectancy. You were basically expecting death to come at any minute. So if you imagine that cocktail of extremes, and displaying great heroism out of a sense of duty and honour, and suddenly the war comes to an end, and you're just waved goodbye, thank you, and forgotten about, and society understandably wants to forget about all that killing and death, and during the 1920s just wants to go headlong into partying and making money. And I suspect that my granddad found it very difficult to fit back into the money-making, grubby, opportunistic, mundane world of survival, which is civilian life. So different, so much the opposite of the life of honour and self-sacrifice and duty, which he would have, or the values that he would have lived by during his service as a fighter pilot during World War One. And I suspect he couldn't form relationships with his children, with my dad and with my dad's 2 brothers. I think my dad may have suffered quite badly from that, also from having to move around as a result of having a father in the RAF. And as a result, I don't think my dad and his brothers liked my granddad very much. I don't think they had much relationship with him. And war was certainly unfashionable for a very long time. And my sister and I, wondered, to this extent, we always wondered why my grandma married him, because he seemed such a trivial, removed, unrelatable character, and she was such an extraordinary character, probably a linguistic genius, very, very intelligent, very strong-willed, very able. I always remember her as a habit of someone who could work things out and be right, and would get things right. And it seems so strange that she would have fallen for him. When I found out that he'd been a fighter pilot during World War One, it all fell into place. I could understand it. But I think it was so difficult for him being able to fit back into society where the parish council want to celebrate the opening of a bus shelter, and which, when you've been massacring the Turkish army, it's not really something you want to celebrate. And I think this is part of the sadness of war, how people suffer in war. You get the obvious, the visible ways where people are blown to bits, and you might get people losing limbs, men getting the balls blown off, losing their lives, terrible facial injuries. But what you get a lot of is the more pervasive, unseen, perhaps more workaday injuries to the mind, the people just not being able to readjust back into society. I think men and women too. You can see an example of this in the women who fought in the French resistance. There's a very good book called A Train in Winter about women who fought in the French resistance. Many of them got caught. And when they came back into society, a lot of those women, most of them actually, nearly, I think all of them except one, couldn't hold down a marriage, couldn't form relationships with their children, died young after lives of mental illness, nightmares and poor health. And that is a very common effect of war. not necessarily. You don't even have to dignify it with the term PTSD. It's just people not being able to fit back in, not being able to readjust. So I think there are two things really right now, and that is what would I say to my granddad now, and what do I say about war today? Well, the first thing, what I'd say to my granddad is that people remember that I remember what he did, and for what it's worth, I treat it with a sense of honour. I honour that. I would go so far as to say that I would say my prayers for him, that the bad feeling, the feeling of not fitting in, the feeling of humiliation, of not being able to form relationships with members of his family, not being respected by his sons very much, that bad feeling, that I could take that away from him somehow, that I could relieve him of that bad feeling. That's what I'd want to say to him, and I'd want to comfort him by telling him about what I'm doing, and to try to say that what he did, the heroism and sacrifice that he showed, that he demonstrated, much more than anything I'm doing. I'm not in anything like the danger he was in. I don't display anything like the heroism that he did, but that what I'm doing shows that the tradition of standing up in the face of difficulty and in the face of an enemy, that continues, and that there is inspiration from someone like him. And I would say that not to boast to him, but in the hope of giving him some kind of comfort that what he did wasn't in vain. It did form part of a tradition that continues. And I think that is appropriate in a wider sense. That is appropriate tomorrow on Remembrance Sunday. That what those people did is not just remembered, but that it is seen as a tradition that they represented, and that we continue, in part inspired by them. And there are, believe me, there are loads of opportunities to continue that tradition today. There is a storm brewing today, and we can prepare for that. And that is a good tribute to those people, it seems to me. And that is what I'm doing, at least, for what it's worth, with limited success. Nothing like the success he had. The second thing is, the second thing to draw from this, I think, is how horrible war is, and the responsibility on the people who create war. Whether it's a Hitler or a Mohammed or a Tony Blair, that responsibility is very heavy. And there's that kind of responsibility. We're not free from that. Today, there is war coming. There is a storm brewing, and I think there is a responsibility on us, if we can, to think through how to win the war that's coming without fighting it. Politicians are making war. They're creating the circumstances for war. Not because they want war, but because they are ruthless, greedy, and addicted to power, will do anything to maintain it, will not allow anything to interrupt their careers. And if war comes as a result of it, I honestly think they do not care. It is not on their radar screen. And then by making it so difficult, by effectively banning so many of us from discussing it, they make it so much more likely that it will have a bloody outcome, when what we need to be doing is thrashing the shit out of this problem. And that is something that we're not doing yet. What we're currently looking for is the entertainment of outrage. Ain't it awful? Look at this. Isn't this situation terrible? How can they do that? Puffing and blowing. And that, when we do that, that sets up the conditions to make things worse. We need to be analysing, looking at this coldly, working out how do we win without war. For instance, today in the news at the moment, we can see there are hordes of invaders coming across the channel. I think 1,200 people yesterday. We're going to see a lot more of that. That is the wave of the future. France, other countries, trying to offload Muslims whom they don't want onto other countries. That is not just a temporary thing. That is not just because Macron is angry with us. That is going to continue. That is going to grow. That is going to come to blows. And again, it is worth thinking through. How do we reverse that? How do we win in that situation? How do we prevail without war? My view is we need firstly to slow the tide, and then to work out a complete remedy, a remedy for total victory, which I think is possible even without war. And that is what I think, again, putting in the effort coldly to do that, the unspectacular effort to work out how we can win without war, that is a good tribute to people who displayed heroism and sacrifice generations ago. But in the meantime, I think we can enjoy paying our respects to all those people tomorrow who did so much that we now have the benefit of, and who sacrificed so much and suffered for it. It is a debt that we can repay simply by honouring them. Thank you.